2, 3, check, we're on. So the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a false flag, which touched off the Vietnam War. So 2 tankers have been hit in the Strait of Hormuz. What's interesting, I have blogged about this for the last 5 or 6 years because of all the saber rattling going on with the Iranians. And I said, oh, there it is, isn't it? And I was banging this thing yesterday. Hey, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. I am going to gravel at your feet forever. So, oh boy, we're in a heap of trouble already, I can see that. So I've been blogging about this. If you don't know what the Strait of Hormuz is, this really narrow waterway. I have it on another presentation, but I'm not going to bother putting up the slide. Very narrow waterway. And on the Iranian side of the strait, it's bristling with missiles. I mean, it's just bristling, and they've got ships and patrols and, you know, the typical jihad, jihad, all the crazy stuff that they do. And so that's their one offensive deal. What is the lifeblood of the planet? The lifeblood of the planet is oil. That's what runs the planet. Without oil, everything shuts down really quickly. And isn't it interesting that that's the one offensive move they have, is to close the Strait of Hormuz. I posited years ago, and this is all, it's on the record, I mean, it's on the blog. You go to the blog post and it's there, that the Iranians more than likely have enriched enough uranium to create a dirty bomb. So a dirty bomb doesn't go the big mushroom cloud, the big hurrah that way. But what it does do, and this would be a scenario, you just get a bunch of ships out there and create a blockade, right, with a bunch of Iranian ships, just tankers, whatever. Chain them all together and detonate the dirty nuke. Now you've got a Chernobyl, essentially, where people can't go through. So you would essentially close the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians are rabid in the sense that their eschatology is different, and remember, this is the whole Sunni Shia thing. So these are Shia Muslims, which is the minority, and there's this great hatred between the two, between the Sunnis, led by Saudi Arabia and others, and the Iranians, and it's which are Shia. And so the Shia Muslims believe in this whole thing with the Mahdi, and you know, we don't have to get into all that because it really isn't pertinent. But it's interesting that, you know, I watch this stuff like a hawk. Sometimes I blog about it, sometimes I don't. I wrote a book called Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, which we're going to reprint that thing eventually one of these days. But it's now 10 years old, and I need to, you know, do an update, actually 11 years old. So all that to say this, that it's very extremely tenuous, and the Iranians have a apocalyptic mindset. I mean, the mullahs in Iran, they want to go at it. I mean, they can't wait because the Mahdi will only come in a time of chaos, according to them. So, I mean, this is what's driving their thinking. There's a quote I came up with. I didn't come up with it. The Holy Spirit gave it to me, like when I was writing Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural 11 years ago, 12 years ago now. And what was interesting was, it's this: the present political landscape is in direct correlation to supernatural events that happened in some cases millennia ago. I'll say it again because it's a lot. And I'm sitting there, you know, typing on my computer and stuff, working on the book, and all of a sudden the Holy Spirit goes, "This is the subtitle to the book." And I'm kind of going, "Whoa, that's amazing, man, far out." The present political landscape, I'm not that smart, trust me. The present political landscape is in direct correlation to supernatural events that happened in some cases millennia ago. That phrase is charged. We in the West, our culture is based on supernatural events. What are they? They're based on the Bible, the biblical prophetic narrative, which are supernatural events which have colored the body politic. That's why we have a Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Where do you think that came from? The springboard for that is the Protestant Reformation. No other country has that. We've got it because of the whole crew and the Protestant Reformation and everything that happened with Locke and everybody else, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Conversely, the Muslims have another supernatural event, Muhammad receiving the Quran. That has colored the body politic of the entire Muslim world. See what I'm getting at? No one ever talks about this stuff, but that's where we are. And the Israelis believe in what? What Moses gave the Torah, another supernatural event on top of Mount Sinai. The Hindus believe in so many supernatural events, and they've got a bazillion gods for everything, all based on what? Supernatural events. This is what amazes me, and no one talks about it. So the Muslims, The Shia Muslims, in particular, are licking their chops because they think the Mahdi will come back when they create chaos. That's their mindset. We, on the other hand, look for being beamed up, taken out of here when we hear that trumpet sound. There's a song, and if you haven't heard this song, you need to Google it. It's by Molly Skaggs, and she covers a Johnny Cash tune, and it's called Ain't No Grave, and this woman owns it. Don't pay any attention to the woman next to her doing all the weird Christian voodoo stuff. It's just, she's a total distraction. This woman comes out, and she's kind of, you kind of go, what, huh? And she starts just strumming on the guitar, and then she opens her mouth and sings, and it's like, oh my gosh, she owns the song. Every time I hear it, I just cry. The lyrics are incredible. Ain't No Grave, Molly Skaggs. I promise you, it will bless you. So what we're going to do this afternoon, we're going to do this one, then we'll take some time off and have a shuffleboard tournament out in the hallway. Just remember when you were a kid and you used to go with your parents to some place or some hotel, and they had shuffleboard? You know, and you get the little discs and stuff, and you go out there and play. They don't have shuffleboard anymore. I feel deprived. Remember when you were a kid and you had like PF flyers and sneakers, right? Well, the kids today have, first of all, they have two things, and I'm really ticked off about this. Okay? First of all, they can kind of run, and then they go back like this, and they glide, because they have rollers on their feet. And they light up. I'm totally deprived and depraved, but I'm definitely deprived. I mean, why didn't I get that as a kid? This has ruined my entire life. I'm in counseling because of it. Just joking. Where did that come from? All right, so what we will do today, I'm sorry, I got to turn around here. I'm just cracking myself up. Sorry, Lord. King of the Rabbit Trails is about to take us on another ridiculous excursion into the absurd. So we'll finish this puppy up, then we'll go into Fatima. And Fatima is a springboard to what's happening today, and you'll see why. So on the trail of the Nephilim, mathematical mysteries of the mound builders. First of all, the entire mound complex in Newark, specifically the Newark Circle Mound and Newark Octagon Mound. The Circle Mound is about 1,250 feet in diameter. The thing's huge. And the walls are up, and it's got this moat that goes all around it. We hired a surveyor, you'll see that in a few minutes, to check the interior of the moat. No one's ever done this. Is the moat level? If the moat's level and all this water was in there, and who knows where the water came from, we believe at one time there was some sort of an underground pipeline type of thing, primitive pipeline, which fed the moat. So you got to think the way it looked thousands of years ago when it was built. No trees, torchlight going, the interior of the henge, because it's a circle, the moat is filled with water, and in the center of this thing is a mound, and that's where the altar was, and that's where the human sacrifice took place. And according to some, when the circle came around like this, there were two snake heads, two serpent heads, huge dragon heads in front of the mound. Just like Chichen Itza, just like the Great Serpent Mound, the serpent motif is everywhere. And see, archaeologists won't really look at it for what it is. It's always the serpent. It's always the serpent. The seed of a serpent, the offspring of a serpent, will be at enmity with the seed, the offspring of the woman. Genesis 3:15. It's unless we understand that and come to grips with that, we never really grasp what's going on. It's a seed war. The offspring of a serpent will be at war, at enmity with the offspring of the woman. He, Messiah, he, the one who will crush the serpent's head. And once he knows that, he's sitting there going like, oh my gosh, God can't lie, I get that. He's not, he's just is, I am that I am. I'm a created being, but I've rebelled and I've led a third of the angels with me. This spells my doom. I don't like this. And this is why what happens 3 chapters later in Genesis 6, this whole eruption, it's the reason for the flood. It's not that God's wacky and some genocidal, maniacal, capricious, warmongering, wrathful God, I smite the planet, peon squish. No, it's not doing that. It's everybody was there, was contaminated in some way with the whole satanic Nephilim hierarchy. Ever think about this? I'll talk about this tonight, but I want to drive this point home. Some people think the mark of the beast, I love this when I first became a Christian, I don't, it's the RFID chip, I just know it's the RFID chip. They've got this chip and it's going to be in everything and you can't buy a cell go or trade without it's the RFID chip. Oh my God, it's the mark of the beast. What do we? No, it's not the mark of the beast. It's a step towards it. The mark of the beast is something way more insidious than that. The mark of the beast is an implant. I better plug this in. Otherwise, the computer's just going to, halfway through, out of the computer, boom, all the screens go black. It's a sign. We can now leave the room. Hallelujah. Yes, sir. Otherwise, you'll go on all afternoon. So the bottom line is this. I believe that the mark of the beast, and think about this, and I'll talk about it again tonight, that the mark of the beast is, when you take it, there's no redemption. Anyone who takes the mark winds up in the lake of fire. People will seek death in those days but not find it. What's that about? It's all there. It's something incredibly nefarious but also extremely mysterious, and it's been guarded, and we think we know what it is. You take the mark of the beast, and here's the punchline. And you ever wonder why, gee, there's no grace and mercy in this at all. You take the mark of the beast and you wind up in the lake of fire. It's just dreadful. I don't want to go to the lake of fire. It's really hot there. Why does that happen? Why do you wind up in the lake of fire? Because you're a Nephilim. Because the chip, the mark, changes your DNA and you become the seed of the serpent. And you can't redeem that.
Okay, we can all go home now.
I know, most of you have never heard that. When I got it, I about fell out of my chair. You take the mark, you become a modern-day Nephilim. That's why everything has changed. And I'll show you tonight what the implant actually looks like, because we took one out of somebody in an operating theater. And when I started talking about this, that people were being taken in the middle of the night against their will and being implanted on board UFOs, everyone laughed at me until we have it all on film. And we showed the whole process, x-rays, CAT scans, whole deal. I'll show you that tonight, just whetting your appetite. And we took it out. And when we went to take it out, it was cloaked. It was cloaked. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. But the bottom line is what's coming is unprecedented, folks. It's unprecedented. And so in the days of Noah, everyone was contaminated one way or the other with this whole. They had ritualistically gave themselves over to the paradigm, and that's why the flood. And only 8 people, and all 8 were pure. Ham's wife, in my opinion, she's not running around, with a Nephilim gene. It's not what we're looking at, in my opinion. And I've written this book, and I told you all raised your right hand. Yesterday was that? Is that when how long have I been here? Oh my gosh. Where am I now? So, but it seems like it was like a million years ago, but we all raised your right hand, and I told you, it's a suicide mission by the fallen angels. They do it because they realize they have no other alternative but to do what they're about to do. It's a suicide mission, and they do it again and again and again with the promise that we'll get you out of the jail, because we know they know where they're going to go, but Satan has told them, I'll get you out. It's going to work. As soon as I get control, I'll spring you guys, and you'll have a great place in my kingdom. Now, I don't know where that's what happened, but that's conjecture on our part, but that's what we think is going on here. Because, again, I'll just say this, when Semyaza, this is from the book of Enoch, Semyaza is there on Mount Hermon. He says, I fear to the other angels, other watcher angels. So they're there, they're all ready to do this thing, but everyone's kind of hesitant, okay? And this is the kicker. When I've read this scripture like hundreds of times, I've quoted it like I'm about to quote it at conferences, and I never understood this till the Spirit of the living God gave me illumination, if I can use that word, gave me insight to what was really going on there. Semyaza, which is the name of the fallen angel, says this, I fear ye will agree not to do this deed, and I alone shall have to bear the penalty of this great sin. He knows exactly what he's going to do. He knows that there's a penalty that's going to come upon him for doing this great sin, but he does it anyway because it's the only shot they have. Why are they doing it? If they can contaminate the genome, if they can pollute the DNA, Messiah, the one who will come and crush the serpent's head, will not be born. Because he can't be born, right? So that's it. Game over. We get the planet back. Ha ha, we win. The cross changes everything. And he didn't see it coming. So once the cross happens, he realized, And ever wonder, this is all in the cosmic chess match, ever wonder why he goes after the Lord all the time, but try to kill him, try to kill him, try to kill him, try to kill him, and then Jesus finally goes, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own volition, of my own will. So that's where we are. So let's get into this. So we're into an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle on many of these sites. And again, when we look at this, we have to ask ourselves, you go back 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years like America's Stonehenge or like Stonehenge in England or wherever, and it's all done on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. And talk to someone, how do you create an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle? I mean, we can do it today. We've got telescopes. We have writing implements to write things down. We can plot these things which look like this. Now, you'd have to stand here and you'd have to plot the moon for 18-and-a-half years to understand what it's doing. Because the moon waxes and wanes. Sometimes it's full, sometimes it's nothing, sometimes it's a little sliver. And so you have to understand that it's an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. How would you know that unless you tracked it for 18-and-a-half years? Or someone just gave you the information. Someone just gave you a download. What are we told about in the book of Enoch? We're told the same thing, that the fallen angels came down and gave the secrets of heaven to mankind. This is nothing new. This is absolutely nothing new. We have to understand that these entities are incredibly nefarious, these interdimensional nefarious entities, fallen angels, whatever you want to call them. It's really a horrible name, fallen angels. Angel just means messenger. They are nefarious interdimensional entities which are in a fixed state and they hate us. They absolutely hate us. And they come to rob, kill, and destroy. That's their mission. Rob, kill, and destroy, and deceive. They're masters of deception, masters of deception. So they give this information, and everything's built on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. That alone is mind-boggling. How they build the Newark Circle Mound, the Octagon Mound, America's Stonehenge, and some of these other sites, all on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. Here's something that's mind-blowing. These are three sites in Newark, and they are separated by basically, you can see it right here, 1.4 miles, like this whole deal, this isosceles triangle. Here's the center of the Great Circle Mound. That right dead center is where the altar was. It's still, the platform is still there. And then Geller Hill, and then the center of the Octagon Mound. Now, the terrain is not flat. So the question is, and we sat down with Todd Wallace and asked him about this, how would you do this in antiquity? They don't have transits. They don't have them. So how are they doing this? You have to use something other than your eyes to sight a line like this and look at it. It's perfect, absolutely perfect. Geller Hill, where we were, and this is all in episode 3, was allegedly a burial ground for the giants. It's the highest point in the county there. And they're always, you will notice some of these sites, you always go up. They're always built in high places. This is why when you read in the biblical prophetic narrative, the idols in the high places, the groves in the high places, they go there. And these are gateways. Some of them are gateways and portals, and they are charged and open with human sacrifice. Blood sacrifice is what is needed to open the gateways. When the Mayan elders came over in 2012 and performed ceremonies at the Great Serpent Mound at Cahokia, which is just an hour and a half away, right outside of St. Louis and other places, they did this deliberately because they know that these places were charged places, and so they did this deliberately. So you can see that we've got advanced mathematics here, and as a mathematician, we start looking at the angles here and what it actually represents, and we realize that this is like, these distances are very over a mile, as you can see. 7,392 feet. So it becomes 7,392 feet. It becomes really bizarre. And it's one thing if I'm doing it like on the stage here with a ruler and a tape measure. Good luck, even today with a ruler, if a 25-foot ruler, I was going to make a nice shot, I could do it pretty well, right? But now we're like looking at a mile How do you cite that? How do you make that happen? And why do they care? Because they can do it. No one's sweating this, they can do it. And who is the prince of the power of the air? Our mission statement one more time: to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air and to herald the return of the King Jesus. Because this thing is not going to change until he comes back. And I was actually taken, no, I'm not going to go there because I'll start crying, never mind. So let's go. So Archaeological Atlas of Ohio, not doing it. Can't make me do it. So actually he can. You don't know what I'm talking about, never mind. But Archaeological Atlas of Ohio, there are 10,000 mounds alone in Ohio. So let me get this straight. What are these people doing all day long? They're going to make some mounds today. What do you think, Tonto? So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that's just in Ohio alone. I mean, and it doesn't add up. Where's the burials? It takes thousands of years, LA, for all these mounds to be. Nonsense. Where are the burials? Show me the burials. Everybody wasn't cremated, so what's going on here? And why is it that Native Americans don't remember building them? Oh, because they forgot that they had built them. That's what the anthropologists and the archaeologists tell us. That Native Americans built all these mounds and all these incredible landmarks and everything else, but they just simply forgot that they had done so. That's crazy, because when you talk to the Native Americans, their oral tradition, they talk about everything and it's handed down. Boom, 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 right down the line. And it's all by memory. They find someone who has a great memory, and then the one who has the knowledge passes that down, and you can't change a word or add a word. And they learn from the time they're really small and can talk. They learn the tribe's history, and they could just recite the thing like this: Kunta Kinte went out into the jungle to make a drum and was never seen again. That was the oral tradition from, remember the story Roots? And he finds the tribal elder, oral tradition, and there it was. Kunta Kinte went out to make a drum, and was, there it was. And he just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Roots, Alex Haley. But that's because they take great pride of the oral tradition. But here's the deal: when you look at something like this, you've got geometry here. You've got advanced geometry. I mean, that's what people don't get. When you've got angles that have to be precise like this, they've got to be precise angles. If you're off just a little bit, it throws the whole thing off. How are they doing that? I mean, it's one thing, again, if we're just making a small one, but these things go for a mile. You see, what I'm trying to get and convey is this is supernatural. It's absolutely supernatural. We're looking at stuff that thousands of years ago, there's no flipping way they could do it. They don't have the material, the tools, or anything else to measure by. But they do up there, the fallen ones do, and it's fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. That's what it is. Fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture, and it's worldwide, as we've talked about for the last couple of sessions. So this is the Great Circle Mound. Give you an idea of what it really looks like. How many have actually been there? Give me a show of hands. Anybody? Wow, this is in Ohio, guys. So what? This is drone footage. I'm up about 800 feet. Watch. Can you turn the lights off? Thanks. So here is where you can start to get an idea of just how big the Circle Mound really is. You can see the interior of the moat like here. See all the trees? You got to remove all the trees. So this is the interior right there. That's the moat, like that. And you can see how high, these are all houses around it. And by the way, when we have had calls from people who live in these houses, the houses are, there's people are possessed, there's lots of demonic activity that happens in these places. Let me go forward here. Oh yeah, okay, let me go back. Right there is a pretty good shot. It's better over on the other monitors, but that just gives you an idea. It's 1,250 feet across like this, and the center of the mound where the sacrifice took place is right in this area. This is the gateways down in here. Look at all the houses. See the car right there? Just gives you an idea how big this thing is. And
Todd Wallace is walking in the bottom of the moat of the Great Circle Mound.
okay, so this is Todd Wallace, and Todd's an engineer. He's also a surveyor. And we hired Todd because what we wanted to do was figure out how accurate is it. If I'm making a moat, how accurate is it? And remember, this thing is a couple thousand years old, so we've got sediment and slough that's accumulated. So Todd measures this thing, surveys the interior of the moat, that you see right there, and give you an idea just how big this thing is. It's basically dead level. Now that's 9 inches from here to here. So 6 inches is about there. It's between 6 inches and a foot. So that's 9 inches again. So 9 inches and add 3 inches. That's a foot right there, almost exactly, right there. That's a foot, okay? So you got 1 foot, so it's between 6 inches about there and a foot level. And that can be accounted for just from slough that's going in over a couple of thousand years. For practical purposes, the interior of the moat is dead level. The circle is 1,250 feet in diameter, but the moat is going around the circumference. So how did they do that in the ancient world? You tell me. And archaeologists are hysterical. Well, they did it very slowly. They carted the buckets with deerskin of water, and they dug a small section at a time and then filled it up and got level. Really? Why don't you guys go and take this primitive hoe here and just give me a small moat? Just show me how they did it. Just show me how. I mean, it's an arduous task. Could it be done? Well, yeah, if you have enough manpower, anything can be done. But it's not easy. And the thing is essentially dead level. So when they allow the water to come in, this thing fills up. I mean, it's very, very deliberate. And it also looks very much like Stonehenge over in England. So let's see what Todd has to say. Oh.
Todd Wallace is walking in the bottom of the moat of the Great Circle Mound. This gives us a perspective of what an incredible engineering accomplishment this is. Are we supposed to believe that primitive tools were used to create this amazing edifice? Or perhaps another explanation is in order?
We did a survey of the area, GPS, the elevations of the moat, all the way around the interior, the different angle points through there. Found the moat to be fairly level, within 6 inches to a foot in most areas, all the way.
Right there, look at that. Just look at that. I'm standing above him with a camera on level ground. He's down in the interior of the moat. Behind him is the outer wall of the Great Circle Mound. Just look at that and let that sink in. For any of those of you who have dug a pond on your property or moved dirt, just look at that. And then go back here with primitive tools.
Amazing edifice, or perhaps another explanation is in order.
We did a survey of the area, GPS, the elevations of the moat, all the way around the interior of this, different angle points through here. Found the moat to be fairly level, within 6 inches to a foot in most areas, all the way around. The only way they could have made it that level would have been to use water. I mean, today we would use a transit or a level and a level rod to grade something like this out, create elevations like this. So the only other thing you could have used for that time period would have been water. Water, obviously, from the gravitational pull is all, the same elevation all the way around. You could have used that to excavate to the right depth that you want.
Again, it'd be very hard. So here's the Octagon Mound, and the Octagon Mound is part of a Newark Circle Earthworks. There was these guys called Squire and Davis, and in the middle part of the 19th century, they went out and they surveyed. They had, surveying tools, and they went out and surveyed many of these mounds. And without them, we would have no idea what these things look like because many of them have been destroyed. Same thing with the Newark Earthworks. A lot of it is no longer there. And all we have is Squire and Davis's drawings. For instance, like some of these causeways, which go from the Circle Mound over to the Octagon, this is no longer here. But parts of it are. Like some of these mounds are still here. And there's a little part of one over here that's still intact. But a lot of this is not. And what's amazing is the Octagon, which is right here, okay, you could fit the Great Pyramid inside of it. And it's not an equal octagon. In other words, it'd be one thing if you drew an octagon and you've got 8 equal sides. But, I'll give you guys, take the challenge. I'll give you a ruler without a compass, and you draw an octagon for me. Good luck. First try. Good luck. Just on a piece of paper. Just on a piece of paper. Without a compass, you don't know what the angles are. So you're just guessing. Now, you could get something that's kind of close maybe, but it's going to be lopsided and kind of weird unless you, be able to measure it and stuff. But they don't have that. So how are they doing it? And it's an unequal octagon. So we think what we're looking at here is advanced trigonometry, advanced geometry. And where does it come from? It doesn't come from here. And the fact is, you can't see the octagon. I've stood in it twice. When you stand in the octagon and you look out, you see that you're in some kind of shape, but you really have no idea what it is unless you're told it's an octagon. You know there's mounds in the distance, but you're going like, well, what is this? Why would someone do this? And why is it that you can only see all these sites from the air? So there's another shot. That's what the Octagon Mound looks like with the circle mound. Look at the houses all around it. Give you an idea how big it is.
Okay, I'm looking at the North American Circle Mound and the Octagon Mound. What I see is a fairly complex geometric construction. To construct something like this requires a knowledge of geometry. It requires a knowledge of angles, of bisecting angles, of adding angles, subtracting angles. I think there was a good knowledge of geometry that went behind the design of this. I don't know of any Native American tribes that were using geometry 2,000 years ago. This obviously was done by someone who either had sophisticated equipment or who had a solid understanding of geometric concepts. There's just no way. If I had given an assignment, construct two geometric figures and with some type of symmetry and handed in, and a student gave me something like this on a piece of paper, and I said, well, tell me how you produce these angles. And they said, oh, I just kind of measured here and I sketched this out. That would be sufficient evidence to say the student was cheating. I see no way it happened intuitively or by chance.
So Dorothy is a professor of mathematics, and then we get the whole idea of squaring the circle, and this is something that I think you would find really interesting. So we've got advanced geometry, trigonometry, and surveying employed in these earthworks, and it's mind-boggling. And Native Americans, with all due respect, Native Americans did not have this. They just don't. And why, if they did, why would they just forget it? You would guard this with your life. This could be precious, but they don't have it and it's not there. So we are looking at a narrative which is being managed by the powers that be. It gives you an idea of what you're looking at. There's also something here that the angle of the Great Pyramid looks like it might be embedded. And this is all advanced mathematics, which is way over my head. I can kind of look at it and get an idea of what it is, but I'm not a mathematician. So I don't really fully appreciate what's going on. I have a clue, an idea, because people have explained it to me on some level, but I am blown away. When I look at this, I'm just blown away by what the builders of the Octagon Mound and the Circle Mound and some of these other places actually employed.
Just like in the first show, we mentioned the
Now this is Chief Joseph Riverwind. Chief Joseph Riverwind is a Tiano Peace Chief, and he weighs in on all three so far of the episodes. Episode 1, Mysterious Mound Builders, 2, Mathematical Mysteries, and 3, which is coming out, Secrets of the Supernatural, Voices from the Other Side. And listen, watch his face as he gets towards the end and he starts talking about the great injustice. Watch his eyes, because he really gets ticked off, and rightfully so. Oh. Sorry.
Just like in the first show, we mentioned the Shawnee Chief, who on record said, we didn't build these things. But yet, if you go up to these areas that are under the Shawnee jurisdiction of protection, so where these mounds and things are, and it says that the Shawnee built them. So there's a false narrative that's already being put in place, even when the people themselves say it wasn't us. So we're not talking about just 200 or 300 years ago, white settlers asking the natives, hey, who built this, and them saying we don't know, we didn't do it. We're talking 10, 15 years ago. Modern day white settlers asking, hey, who built these? And the chief of a nation says, it wasn't us. But yet history still says, we're going to say it was you.
Look at him.
So there's a great injustice being done there, because that's purposely being deceitful. And it's also dishonoring and disrespecting the First Nations people is saying that our oral tradition doesn't matter if it doesn't fit the narrative of their historical paradigm.
When he did that, I mean, every time I watched that, I would get chills. The bottom line is this, I talked about this yesterday. When you go to the Great Serpent Mound, there's this new signage which says the Shawnee built it. But the Shawnee chief comes on record and says, we didn't build it. We respected it. It was sure when we got here, but we didn't build this. But the narrative says, oh no, the Shawnee built it. So Chief Joseph states, I'm just kind of reiterating or recapping it, Chief Joseph states that, you know, this is a great injustice because you guys are pushing this narrative. You don't care about our oral traditions. All you care about is pushing your narrative. The Shawnee built it when we're saying we didn't build it. But see, it doesn't fit the narrative. Like I said last night, when we found the picture of a 9-foot skeleton in Catalina, they redacted the picture at the Catalina Island Museum. They redacted the giant out of the picture. These are supposed to be scientists. These are supposed to be people, they go where the evidence leads them, not deliberately obfuscate the evidence like with climate change, but I digress. So let's continue. Okay, we're going to close this session up with this. This is all drone footage, aerial drone footage that we shot, and the string, the music it's just really, it's a beautiful string piece. I think you'll enjoy it. But look at this, because this, you really see what, it just illustrates everything that we've been talking about with the mounds, and you can see how incredible and how large they are. So let's take a look at this. Better to watch it on the smaller screens, I think. This is Fort Ancient. This is the Grave Creek Mound, West Virginia. Look at the houses behind it. This was a stone mound on private property in Newark. This is part of the Octagon complex in Newark, Ohio. This is called the Junction Group. Look at the size of the circles. Notice the cars. This was a mound on private property at the end of a cornfield. So, why am I getting feedback? Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. 1, 2, checking 1, 2, okay. So lights, please. Okay. So, that concludes the mound builders. Now, where's my Fatima? We could take a break. Should we take a little break? Like a 5-minute break or something, or are you guys okay? It's your call. Because if not, I'm ready to go into another one. Guys okay with that? Take a 5-minute break? Okay. Go. We went over there 2 years ago in 2017 on the 100th anniversary of the so-called miracle of the sun. And it was the type of thing where, and oh, there it is again. Don't touch that. Okay. So it was the type of thing, you know, when the Lord gives us marching orders, you know, I've learned to follow. And it's funny how, you know, the Lord speaks to you, well, hey, maybe you need to see a psychiatrist. Well, no, the Lord speaks to me. That's how it works, just like the Lord speaks to you. We learn over a period of time what his voice sounds like. And I love it. Sometimes I'll go like, oh, no, that wasn't the Holy Spirit. No, it's just like, no, I'm not, okay, it was the Holy Spirit type thing, you know, because we don't maybe not want to do something. So Peggy's in another room, and we're, you know, getting ready to go to church, I think, actually, and I'm in our bedroom, just putting on my shoes or whatever, and I'm just, you know, just hanging out, and all of a sudden the Lord just goes, Fatima, like that. And I go, oh my gosh, it's 2017. Oh my gosh, it's the 100th year anniversary. Oh my gosh. And I walk into where Peggy goes, and I go, we're going to Fatima. She goes, what? I go, yeah, we're going to make a film on Fatima, maybe 2 films. And so, out of the blue, someone donated like $8,000 out of the blue. Just they didn't know, have no idea what's going on. So here's the provision to go to Fatima, Portugal. So we went, we shot tons of footage on Fatima. We went to the shrine. We were all over the place. So why did I do that? I've been a student of Fatima for years. I wrote about it in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. And the first thing we need to settle up right off the bat, in both films, we never go after Mary of the Bible. We don't do that. Catholics, in fact, there's a caveat in the beginning of the first film that says millions of people, and it's true, millions of people go to Fatima, Portugal every year. I kind of stop for a second and then I continue. Millions of Muslims encircle the Kaaba stone every year. Millions of Hindus celebrate Guru Puja in India. Millions of Buddhists worship at thousands of temples. People have the right to believe what they want to believe and to worship in ways that they see fit. And the reason why I did that was we take the whole anti-Catholic thing right off the table. We're not here to bash Mary. You can believe whatever you want to believe. We don't care. But it wasn't Mary of the Bible that appeared to those 3 kids. And what's important about this, and you'll see it at the end of the film, is where it all goes. And that what Fatima did is it set the acceptance, it set a precedent to accept this phenomenon as something from God. And it's anything but. In my opinion, it's a lying size of wonder. So there's 2 films, Fatima, A Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception, and the second film is called Strange Phenomena. So let's get right into it. So 1917 to 2017, the 100th anniversary, that's a shot. It's a poster, obviously. That's what the sanctuary looks like at night. And you can see over here, it can hold upwards of 1 million people. This thing is really dialed in. I mean, really dialed in. And it's big business. On the streets as you walk to get to the sanctuary, you have to walk through these streets, and they are lined with shops, and in the shops are just, we call it Jesus junk. It's just statues and beads and little memorandums of the 3 kids, and we'll get into who these 3 kids were in just a minute and why the whole thing, in my opinion, was a managed agenda. So in 1917, it's an extremely charged atmosphere. World War I is raging, for starters. So, and people in Europe are freaked out. They've never had this type of a conflict, this type of armed conflict, where the trench warfare and the mustard gas and people are being cut down by automatic weapons. And even towards the end, they're starting to use planes then dropping bombs out of the planes, throwing the bombs out of the planes. So, they didn't have machine guns or strafing yet. That wasn't yet what's World War II. But it's changing warfare, and people in Europe are totally freaked out because of what's going on. So I'm setting the stage, setting the climate for what happens in World War I. And
Hindenburg described it.
so at the same time, the rise of the communists, Lenin, Trotsky, and others are rising up in the Communist Party, and people in Europe are freaked out. The Bolsheviks are rising up, and of course we all know 1917, that's when the revolution happens, the Tsarist regime is taken, they're all shot eventually, and including, what's her face, what was the, Anastasia, I believe she didn't make it, so anyway. But that's the end of that regime, and you got to remember the people in Europe see this, and they're all freaked out, because it's like, we don't want this here. We don't want, well, they know what's happening in Russia. They don't want communism, and this is why the whole Nazi party always blamed everything on the communists and the Jews. So there's this, it's a very charged atmosphere, very charged. So you've got World War I going on, you've got the Bolshevik Revolution going on, everything is very unstable, and in the halls of London you've got the Balfour Declaration that's happening, where Balfour is going, we need to give the Jews a homeland. And what's really interesting, when you go back, I had a pamphlet that burned in the fire, sorry, but I had a pamphlet from 1929, all right, written by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, and it basically stated in writing that the Temple Mount, we all know the Temple Mount was Solomonic, it was built by the Jews, and Solomon built it. I mean, it's by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, right? And no one cared about, you go back into the 1880s, 90s, or go back when Mark Twain was there, and the place is a wasteland. I had pictures from what it was like. It's a wasteland, no one's living there, nobody cares. The latter rain doesn't fall, the place is plagued by earthquakes and locusts. No one wanted to live there. That's the end of the story. But the Jews start trickling back, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it is sort of interesting when the Jews, a little sidebar here, when the Jews start trickling back to Israel, Satan goes, oops, something's going on here. They're coming back, this is going to fulfill prophecy, we can't have that. So he raises up his Antichrist man for the time, which of course is Adolf Hitler. Why was Hitler obsessed with killing the Jews? Had Hitler won World War II, I would posit that there would be not one Jew left on the planet, or very few, if any at all. And Israel would certainly never be where it is today. So out of the ashes of the Holocaust, what we see is the creation of the modern state of Israel, which fulfills numerous prophecies, never to be pushed out of their land again. Once I've gathered you from the four corners of the earth and resettle you, you'll never come out of that. This is your land, that's it. And this is, again, the idea that the current political landscape is in direct correlation to supernatural events that in some cases happened millennia ago. That prophecy is written thousands of years ago, and yet we see the rebirth of Israel on the ashes of the Holocaust. So it's a very, very charged time, and of course Lord Balfour, let's just manipulate it, they were just trying to fulfill prophecy. Oh, come on. So let me get this straight. At the end of World War II, the English have a blockade turning the ships from Germany and war-torn European continent away from Israel or from Palestine, and making them go back to the very concentration camps that were liberated. Now, they weren't concentration camps anymore. They were, they had food and stuff. They were not death camps, but they were back in the concentration camps, some of them. So most people don't know about that. So this isn't manipulated, and we all know that the Israelis had to fight. And I'll tell you one more story, because otherwise, what is it, 3:14? We have time. So, liar. So my friend Richard Shaw is half Jewish. He didn't realize this. He was adopted. And eventually he found his birth parents. They were both dead, but he found this half-sister. And so she filled him in on the whole story. And so he is very much into, he's a Christian, but he's very much into Israel and all that, and the rabbis and all this kind of stuff. So he has a friend who's a playwright who's got dual citizenship. He's American, U.S., and he's also got Israeli. He's in the IDF reserves, okay? So he's a storyteller, he's a filmmaker, writes, and the guy, Dan Gordon is his name. So Rick tells me, hey, Dan Gordon is going to be this the synagogue over in Thousand Oaks. Why don't you go check them out? So, well, I think I can do that. So I go there, and you know, I'm a Christian white guy, right? And I go in to the synagogue, and I sit down, and it's not the main room, but there's probably about 200 people packed into this little room. And Dan Gordon comes up and he starts telling a story about how the Israelis fought and won their independence. And he tells that the Egyptians, remember, it's a 3 or 4 front war. They're coming in from all sides to try to defeat the Jews. They're just going to kill them all, right? So there's a column of Egyptian soldiers within a few miles of Tel Aviv. I think it's maybe 10 or 15 miles out from Tel Aviv. It's a column. They're not being, there's no resistance at all. There's this column of soldiers that is headed towards Tel Aviv, and of course if they capture Tel Aviv, it's over, right? They'll cut the country in half, and that's basically it. So the Israeli Air Force has 3 planes that they bought for $30,000 each from the Czechoslovakian government. The planes on the market were worth $3,000 a piece. That's what they were selling for. So they jacked it up. They had to dismantle the planes and smuggle them into Israel. They're in a hangar. They've never been flown. There's no avionics. There's no tower. There essentially really is no Israeli Air Force, but there's pilots, and these guys volunteer, and they get in these planes, and they have machine guns on them and bombs, okay? And they go out, and all they're told is, the Egyptian column's out there about 10 or 15 miles, go out there, see what kind of damage you can do. So the planes take off, they see the column, they strafe the column, they drop their bombs, and they come back. One plane is shot down, the other 2 make it back. I'm pretty sure that's what happened, something like that. And the Egyptian column thinks that this is just a scouting mission and that the real Air Force is going to come at them. They turn around and they leave. That's how they won the war. That's how they won the war. And then Dan Gordon goes, and I'll never forget it as long as I live, and the pilot of that plane is sitting here right now, and he introduces him, and the guy stands up. I get goosebumps. I better be careful. I'm sorry. Whole place, everybody just starts weeping. Whole place, it was unbelievable. People were just openly weeping because of what God did, how he fulfilled the prophecy, how he brought them back into the land. And these are God's chosen people, and he loves them. Amen. And at some time they will look at him, whom they have pierced, and they will look at him as their only begotten Son. And it was a really powerful, I'm such a big baby. I knew I shouldn't have gone there. Oh boy. Ridiculous. Okay, so let's get back into Fatima. So it's a very charged atmosphere, extremely charged atmosphere that's happening all throughout Europe. So at this point in time, and there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of turmoil, markets are uncertain, everything is it's war, and people don't know what's going on. Enter, Satan knows all of this. He has positioned himself for what the Bible calls lying signs and wonders. May 17th, 1917, a group of psychics, and this is a matter of public record. So you got to watch the way all this fits together, because it's mind-boggling the way Satan uses his people. And I actually visited not the place where this happened, but they've since the automatic writing took place, these spiritists, they have another building that they moved to. We visited that, and we photographed all this stuff, and we actually have the actual letter. We actually photographed the actual handwritten letter, and I'll get to that in a second. So automatic writing is forbidden from us. What automatic writing is, someone goes into a trance, and there's a bunch of mediums around at a table, and they all go into their trance and they get their spirit guides. There's a pen in the person's hand. They go into a trance, and then the hand begins to write. The demon takes control of the hand and begins to write. Madame Blavatsky wrote all of her books this way. She would seal herself up into a room, And she would do automatic writing, and 3 days later she would come up with 500 words. Not her doing it, that's the demon. Same thing with the Urantia book. So this is nothing new. Spiritists, occultists have been using this. In the Cosmic Chess Match, we talk about some of this. That's why it's so important to see the counterfeit. But all this counterfeit stuff has happened for thousands of years, and there's nothing new here. When people go, Edgar Casey was a trance medium, and he was really accurate. I go, yeah, he was accurate to a point about 50, 60%, and I'm being generous. But he wasn't 100% accurate 100% of the time like the God of the Bible is. So the bottom line is these spiritists are getting there, and they have a message that comes through in automatic writing, and it basically is just another shot of what it actually looks like, and, the demon doing this whole thing. And it's backwards. It's handwritten backwards from right to left, like Da Vinci's writing, and it basically says this, that something wondrous is going to happen in Portugal on May 13th of this year. And it's signed Stella Matutina. Stella Matutina, the bright morning star. Guess who that is? Guess who that is? It's Lucifer. That's what it's signed. And Stella Matutina is reads from left to right, but the rest of the thing, as you can see here, is written, you have to hold it up into a mirror, just like Da Vinci used to do. So that's what we're looking at. So it's automatic writing, flag number 1. Flag number 2, Stella Matutina. There's no way you can trust this. But something is going on here. Not only this, but there was another group of mediums who had the same message. They publish it in the paper. They publish the message in the paper. So this is it's all a matter of historical record. And we take all of this, all of our research comes from the 1917 records, handwritten records, as you'll see in a little bit, by the parish priest. We don't take anything from 22 or the 30s or the 40s or the 60s. That's way, way after the event. We take all of the information from the handwritten records that came about in 1917, and it's mind-boggling. So here we have, they put this in the paper, in the Portuguese paper, saying something wondrous will happen on May 13th, 1917. No one knows what that is, but they publish it, and this is a matter of public record, okay? So the next thing is these 3 children. Lucia is 10, Francisco, her cousin, is 9, Lucia is 7. They are illiterate. They cannot read or write. They are illiterate. There are no schools. That's an original picture at Fatima. So they are shepherds. They don't read, they don't write. The stories that they hear are from the parish priest or from their grandparents during the winter, or sitting around a fire or whatever. They're illiterate. They know nothing about the world. They know nothing about anything. They're illiterate peasants. They cannot read or write. 10, 9, and 7. 10, 9, and 7. That's who these kids were. And they're out in the field, and they're tending sheep. Now, that's Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. I have actually stood right at that wall. It's in front of Lucia's house, and we photographed there. They maintain Lucia's house as a shrine. You'll see why. So they're out there and tending the sheep, and this entity appears to them. And they said the entity was small, like 3 feet. It was female. It was wearing a short skirt that came just below the knees. Let's look at this. And this is how do I know this? Because when you go back to the 1917 handwritten records by the parish priest, as Lucia is telling him what she saw, he wrote it down. Women in 1917 wore dresses all the way down to the ground. So flag number 15 on the play is she's wearing a short skirt. Her mouth isn't moving. She's communicating with the children telepathically. When the kids see her, they don't know what to think of this. And she says, don't be afraid. And she's communicating with them telepathically. They never see her lips move. She gives them something to eat and something to drink. All the children eat, but only the girls drink. So Francisco can see her, but he never hears her. He never hears what the entity is saying. Only Lucia and Jacinta can both see and hear her. It's complex. It's a complex deal. So they go back and they tell their parents, this is what we saw. So you can see here, this is the family, and things start getting out of hand really quickly. The first apparition happens at May 13th, 1917, just like the psychics predicted, were told that it would. So something's at play here. What is it? And this will lead us right up into tonight. You'll see where all this goes. But something's at play. And June happens, and the entity tells them to come on the 13th of every month. So I could get down the rabbit hole of why the 13th, that whole deal, but it's an occult number. So on the 13th of June, they come back there, some of the family comes, and they begin to see strange aerial phenomenon. They see what they call flying hats in the sky. Weird aerial cloud formations, things are just weird. Sometimes people hear a buzzing noise when the so-called apparition appears over this tree, and the kids see her and hear her, but only Francisco does not hear her, but he sees her, and no one else can see. Only the children can see. And they know something's going on. The children kneel and they communicate and all this other stuff, and the crowd begins to swell. Same thing. So you have May, June, July. The crowds even become, swell even more. In August, it goes off the rails. By this time, the priest and the magistrates and the mayor and this whole thing is going on, because some people are going, in fact, the parish priest said from the beginning, Father Figueroa, Catholic clothes, it's got to be the Virgin, because who else could it possibly be? We'll get into that, and I'll show you a little bit later in the second film who else it could possibly be. There are more than one candidate here. So all this is going on. The children are locked up in jail for August, so they can't go and see the apparition, but the crowds are still there in August, and the crowds now have swelled to like thousands of people, and they see flying hats and weird atmospheric conditions, and all this other stuff is going on. So September comes, and they say, look, kids, go back and ask the lady, the entity, for a sign. So they go do that. They go back, the lady appears, there's thousands of people there, and they say, we need to see a sign. So the entity says, on October 13th, there'll be a sign. But she never says what the sign's going to be, so no one knows. So October 13th comes, upwards of 70,000 people are standing in that field. 70,000 people. Some people have cars, but not many. It's not like it is today. There are no cell phones. There's one photographer that we know about. His name is Joshua Benolio, who took 12 photos of the scene. I'm getting ahead of myself. So everyone's expectant. They said, the entity said at 12 o'clock there would be a sign, but 12 o'clock comes and goes and there is no sign. And no one knows what the sign's going to be. You got 70,000 people, and it's been raining all night. So everyone is sopped to the bone. I mean sopped to the bone. There's a sea of black and white, well, it's all black and white film, but there's just a sea of umbrellas as far as you can see. And all of a sudden, it stops raining, the clouds part, the sun comes out, and people are going, wow, okay, they're waiting and waiting. Another cloud moves in front of the sun. Out of this cloud comes a spinning object, which spins like this, and it falls to the ground like a leaf, and then comes back up, does this 3 times, before it does what we call the flyby, and it comes over the crowd. This shot that you're seeing here is from Joshua Benolio. Now, these people are looking at something. They have no idea of what that something is. There's nothing in their grid system to prepare them for what they are looking at. This is later dressed up and called the so-called miracle of the sun. And what that supposedly is that, another shot of the people, you can see some of the umbrellas. They're all looking up. Gives you an idea of the size of the crowd. So the Vatican published this photograph here, but it was taken 5 years afterwards. So that doesn't work. And they say this is proof of the miracle of the sun. But it's not, because it was taken 5 years later, and actually what it is a sundog. So what they're saying is another shot of it. What the people are seeing, they call it the sun. If the sun is as big as a watermelon, and the earth the size of a head of the match, which is about the ratio, if the sun moved from its place in the sky we'd all be dead. And it's only a local phenomenon. It's only the people who are standing in the field that see this. People 50 miles away see something, but it's not the sun. The sun's not leaving its place and coming down to the earth. So it's not the sun that people are seeing. There's something else that's going on here. And this is the whole point. This is what they based this whole thing on, is the so-called miracle of the sun. And that's what we're going to walk through here, and you'll see it in detail. So what we think happens is, as the people are waiting, why did the monitors go off? Oh well, it went off. So as people are looking at this object, which is spinning and coming down, the witnesses from 1917 on the record, from the 1917 handwritten documents say this: I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. I looked up and saw a disc-shaped object. The words disc, dull silver is used repeatedly by witnesses. I had a woman who came to me, and I didn't understand this at first. Why is it that one person sees something and someone right next to them sees something slightly different? I didn't understand that. She was in a place called Conyers, Georgia, and you'll see a shot of that a little bit later, in the 90s, where the so-called miracle of the sun and a Marian apparition allegedly was appearing in Conyers, Georgia, right here in the States, okay? So she's out there with thousands of people. They're all looking up like this. Right next to her is her husband. They're both looking at the same phenomenon in the sky. She sees a religious figure. He sees a UFO. How is that possible? They're right next to each other. They're not like 50 feet away. They're right next to each other, looking at the same object in the sky. She sees a religious figure. He sees a UFO. And this is why we get the discrepancy, slight discrepancy of what people are seeing in the field at Fatima. I looked up and saw a dull silver disc, and it was spinning, throwing off all these different colors, and people report that. So something is going on here. This is an illustration of what it actually looked like. So this cloud comes in front of the sun. Out of this comes a spinning object, which is a disc-like object, and it begins to spin and eventually fall over the crowd like this, and then eventually come back into and it does this 3 times. There's also witnesses that saw beings in the craft as the craft flew over the people's heads, probably less than 100 feet. Now, in Portugal at the time, no one had ever seen a plane, and I mean that. It's 1917, and I would venture to say that 99% of the people standing in that field that day had never seen any aircraft of any sort, whether a blimp or it's hard for us to believe, but that's Portugal in 1917. This is a very rural place. There are dirt roads. There are no aircraft. Maybe one plane in Lisbon, but maybe. We're not even sure about that. Essentially, no one's seen any type of aerial phenomenon. Guess what? There's nothing in people's grids to process what they're looking at. Nothing to process what they're looking at. There's no words like they know what an airplane, but they've never seen one. I remember once my dad and I were walking on a beach in California, and this knucklehead in a World War II fighter plane, restored, comes barreling over us. I mean, he was like 100 feet up, maybe, and we dove to the sand. He's still 100 feet up, but when this thing comes at you and it's roaring, it looks way bigger than it really is, and you just go, oh my gosh, we're gonna die. And we both hit the ground like this, and off he went, He didn't come back. So the people in the field have never seen any type of aerial phenomenon at all. They have nothing in their grid system to process what they're looking at. I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. That expression is used multiple times by people, dull silver disc. And then when it does the flyby, which is what is illustrated right here, it gives you an idea. Here's the crowd of people. That's the apparition tree where the entity appears. The thing comes down like this over the crowd. And all these different people, this team of researchers, Fina Diarmada, Joaquim Fernandez, they wrote books on this. They found some of the people based on the photographs. They were to locate them, and they took testimonies from them. Now, people and this, we'll get into the whole idea of the strange phenomenon in just a minute, but this is a copy of the handwritten letters, a photograph of the handwritten testimonies from the people by Father Fiera, the parish priest. So, and that's the source of the information, because this is unredacted, there's no agenda here, the parish priest is going, what did you see? And there are doctors and lawyers who are coming on the record telling Father Fiera, describing the phenomena that they saw. So, another shot of it. And that's Father Fiera. What's interesting is when Fiera gets all this information and he has it all put together several years later, he delivers it to a bishop or a cardinal, I think it's a bishop, in Lisbon, and then he just disappears. Disappeared. No one knows what happens to him. He falls off the face of the... We've tried to track him down because, and I still would like to do that, because he came from some family somewhere. Did he keep a journal? Does he have memoirs which are sitting in somebody's drawer or a chest in somebody's attic that nobody knows about? That's far-fetched. There may be nothing there. But that's how I think, and I just wonder whether there's something, because if we could find that, it'd be incredible to get his side of the story, because he was a witness to the whole thing. He was there, he got all the testimony from the people. So all the information that we're drawing from here, is from the 1917 handwritten documents by Father Fiera. So what happens to the three children? Lucia and Francisco die in the flu. They never make it to their teenage years. The great influenza epidemic. Lucia, that's Francisco. So he dies. Why is it going off? Anybody? What's going on here? Father, I ask that you touch this and not let it flicker. In Jesus' name. So Lucia, when she turns 18, 7 years later, is hustled off to a convent. She's the only witness that's left. And you remember, only Lucia and Jacinta could hear and see her. Francisco couldn't. So now, with Jacinta's dying, the 7-year-old, she was like 9 when she passes away from the flu, there's only Lucia who's going to tell us what happened, or supposedly what happened. There are no messages in 1917. The consecration of Russia is never mentioned in the 1917 documents. It's not there. And we said, okay, show us. Show us where the word Russia is mentioned. It's not mentioned. So this whole idea of consecrating Russia to my Sacred Heart comes much later, basically in 1928. And at this point, when she's 17, 18, she's taken in, she takes a vow of silence, which is common, but she takes a vow of silence, moved into Spain in a convent where no one can see her and she can't talk to anybody, and that's when the memoirs begin to come out. The 3 Secrets of Fatima and all this other nonsense, which in my opinion, with all due respect to people who believe this, completely manufactured with an agenda in mind. Consecrate Russia to my Sacred Heart. Why is that there? Because the Russians are Bolsheviks and communists, and the church is deathly afraid of the Russians, because if the communists take control, the first thing that happens is goodbye Catholic Church, and every other church for that matter, just like what happened in Russia. So there's a lot to be said for this. So that's what happens to the kids. The Secrets of Fatima are not revealed until 1928. It's not in the original handwritten documents from 1917. So now we move to Fatima 2, Miracle of a Son, and I'll just show you the trailer here so you can give it some volume on the... What if what happened in Fatima 101 years ago was much more complex than any of us could have imagined? What if there was a fourth witness hidden away for decades, and through the detective work of researcher Fina de Armada, this witness was discovered and interviewed? In that interview, the fourth witness described seeing a being with blonde hair floating in midair above the same tree that the apparition would later appear over. What if the so-called angel hair that fell over the crowd is also reported by witnesses who have had close encounters with UFOs today? Then there was the dull silver disc, which flew over the 80,000 people gathered at Fatima, which seemed to create chaos as car windshields exploded, hoods flew open, and gasoline spontaneously combusted. What if there was a picture taken 101 years ago that lay undiscovered in the Fatima archives until one man, Jose Machado, had access to it. What he found may be a smoking gun. Then there are the numerous reports of apparitions and so-called sun miracles. But what are these really? Could they be harbingers of deception? This is Fatima 2, Strange Phenomena. So that was the trailer for Fatima 2. And what we discovered, remember we were over there for like, what, 2 weeks? Over there for 2 weeks. We had interviews with people, we went to different sites. First thing we discovered, there were many apparition sites all over Portugal. And then this is the kicker. I remember sitting here with an anthropologist, and I asked him a question. I say, what was here before the Christian era? And he says, oh, there was goddess worship everywhere. I'm just kind of going, what? He goes, yeah, there's goddess worship. And the goddess worship was this woman called Mora, the female, and it was everyone embraced all these serpent cults, embraced the so-called sacred feminine. So it was a matriarchal society with the worship of the goddess. When the Romans came in, they brought in Diana. There's actually a temple which we'll see in about a week or whatever, a little more like 2 weeks, in southern Portugal, temple to Diana. So this whole area is steeped in the worship of the sacred feminine and the worship and goddess worship. That's a huge red flag. So what are we looking at really? Not a shot of Mora, the mother goddess. It's a shot of Diana, the huntress. Notice the short skirt. Notice the short skirt. Then Fina di Armada, which is right here. Fina di Armada was a researcher. She passed away in 2014, so I never got to meet her, but I met her daughter. And her daughter comes in on the record. Her daughter sort of taken the mantle, and it was fantastic to discuss all this with her. Fina di Armada was doing a paper. She was in school, and she was doing a paper on influential women of the 20th century. And so she wanted to do a paper on Lucia, right? And that's how she gained access to the sanctuary at Fatima. And that's where she got to see, and one of the very few people to ever read, all these handwritten testimonies. She was not allowed to photograph them, but what she would do is she would bring a tape recorder and read in the tape recorder mic, what she was reading. She would record it. So she would go home and she would be reading as fast as she could and recording the text. And she couldn't photograph it, obviously couldn't take anything out or Xerox it. So her hands are kind of tied, but she's figured out a way to make it work, and they allowed her to do that. And from this, she's uncovering all this information. And one of the incredible finds was a fourth witness that went completely under the radar until Fina di Armada brought this out to the public. And what happened was, this fourth witness, just like Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, is also a shepherdess, and she's out there tending sheep. And as she's tending the sheep, she sees you're not with me on the slides. Why isn't it changing? Let me try it again. There we go. Okay, good. So as she's out there, she sees this androgynous being in a white kind of dress smock thing. She's not sure if it's a boy or girl. It's got blonde hair. So blonde hair in Portugal is, we good? I won't stand anywhere near that. So blonde hair in Portugal is unheard of. And the fact that this whatever this entity is, it's laughing and singing. There's a ring of stones around this tree. And by the way, this is exactly the same tree that the entity later appears over. So this woman, Carolina Carrera was her name, the fourth witness, she's seeing this, and she describes, this is another shot of what the being at Fatima allegedly looked like. It was wearing this kind of like quilted deal. It held some sort of a ball. There's the dress right below the knees. Very, very strange. So she's out there, and she is looking at this entity, and she looks back to the sheep, and the sheep are kind of stunned they're kind of paralyzed, and when she looks back at the entity is no longer at the base of the tree, the entity is floating on the treetops. And this is all handwritten testimony, Father Fiera, which Fina di Armada discovered. What was incredible about this is decades later, and Fina knew the woman's name, Carolina Chiara. She goes to Fatima, the village, and she finds her. And that's what the picture is here. Fina took this picture of the fourth witness. That's Carolina Chiara, obviously very old at this time, and that is the fourth witness, which is just incredible. So the fourth witness goes pretty much under the radar, and there's the being floating above the treetops. And what we see of it, that there are ancient serpent cults all throughout Portugal that worship the sacred feminine. These are done by our CGI guy, Wesley Sangiorgi. Serpent cults everywhere. And what happens is, with this flyby, it's not this benevolent, wonderful experience. Car windshields explode. The gasoline spontaneously combusts. People get burn marks on their skin. Their clothes, which are absolutely sopping wet, underneath the flyby from this craft, the clothes become dry as well as the ground. So we're looking at strange phenomena, absolutely. And as the people look up, they're definitely seeing something. This is, again, an original picture taken from Joshua Benolio, 1917, in October 13th, 1917. So in UFO lore, people who sometimes see UFOs have burn marks on their skin. This is exactly what is reported in, these are shots of people that have had encounters and they get burn marks on their skin. And this is exactly what some of the witnesses underneath this object that flew over them reported. There were burn marks. Car windshields exploded. Again, in ufology, this is very common. This windshields will just explode. So there's a great amount of energy that's being just demonstrated and blowing out the car windshields. The car windshields at Portugal, this is what they recorded. So this isn't some benevolent, wonderful act where everyone is like the movie where everybody falls to their knees and it's like, ah! It's not that at all. People are freaking out. I'll show you a clip in just a little bit. You'll see in modernity the same type of complete chaos because there's nothing in people's grid system to deal with this stuff. So you've got burn marks on the skin, you've got windshields that are exploding, you've got a buzzing noise that people are hearing in their ears, and this buzzing noise was associated in pretty much most of the apparitions, from May to October. When the entity would appear, people who couldn't see her would hear this buzzing noise. The clothes and the ground became instantly dry. Again, this is another shot from 1917 to give us an idea of just how many people were in the field that day. Something called, which they call angel hair. Again, it's dressed up. When we see something, we take our cultural knowledge, what we have in our grid system, and we try to define what it is we're looking at based on what we know. So there's strange substance fell down on the ground. People call it angel hair. Later on, towards modernity, it was turned into rose petals from Mary. That's the whole thing is just being managed and manipulated from 1917 to modernity. So this was what fell on the crowd was rose petals. Well, not so fast, citizen. People talk about these strange white fibers that fell on the crowd, and this same white fiber called angel hair is also found with UFO sightings and UFO events. This is what happens. Windshields break, burn marks on the skin, and angel hair. Where am I going with all this? LA, why do you have such an axe to grind about the UFO phenomenon? Because this is the coming great deception. And you'll see what Fatima does. I'll get to the punchline. You'll see how Fatima completely twists the whole thing and everybody just accepts it. Everybody, oh, it's great, bring it on. It's Mary in the Bible. It's a religious figure. It's Jesus. So enter this man, Jose Machado. We met him last year when we went back to Portugal. And that's when we discovered that Portugal had all these ancient mounds and dolmens. We're going back there a week from this Saturday. We'll be in Lisbon, and then we're filming over there for 3 weeks. Portugal, Malaga, Spain, Karnak, France, and America, Stonehenge. We're on the trail of the Nephilim, and we're meeting with archaeologists, anthropologists, people, the whole deal. It's a very, very rigorous trip. We'll be exhausted by the time we come back. So enter Jose Machado. He is a professor of semiotics. What a professor of semiotics do, they study film. They study pictures, they study film. This is what they do. They analyze this stuff. So he's a professor of semiotics. He teaches this on a university level. He gets access to the Fatima archives, to the glass plates that Joshua Benoliel took. There are 12 of them. This isn't Polaroid stuff. These are glass plates. In other words, in 1917, they've got the wooden box cameras, they've got a glass plate, you take a picture, you pull the glass plate out, you put it in the container. This is how they're photographing the stuff, and he takes 12 photographs. I have maintained, you can go back and listen to me on George Norrie, I've said, George, somebody had to have taken a picture of the so-called miracle of the sun. There's got to be something somewhere. I won't pound the top, I promise. So I almost did. It's got to be something somewhere. So there's a shot of Jose Machado holding the glass plates by Joshua Benoliel in the Fatima archives. You see, what drives me nuts about all this stuff, just like the picture in Catalina that I discovered, it's like everything is like, we're just going to hide this from the people, and you can't look at it. We won't let researchers look at it. Nah, 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 nah. But somehow he gets access, and this guy tells us on the record there were 3 photographs, in his words, that had problems with them. And we go, what do you mean by problems? And he says, basically, there are objects in the photographs that shouldn't be there. So to our absolute and utter amazement, and I would suggest looking, let me see what this monitor looks like here. I'd probably go with one of these, not the overhead, but I'll show you in just a second. Dim the lights just for a second. Let's see how that looks. That's good right there. So this is Joshua Benoliel's photograph from 1917, October 13th. All right, he's in the field. Look at the people. There's the apparition tree right there. Here's this smoke. Something comes up, makes a right angle turn, and there's an object there. Okay? There's an object there. Joshua Benoliel tells us on the record, after examining the glass plate, whatever this object is, this disc-like object is, it is not a smudge, it is not a chemical burn. Whatever it is, it's intrinsic in the glass plate itself. So we took the photograph, and all we did was clean it up. In other words, we took it into Photoshop. We didn't Photoshop it, but we got rid of the artifacts around it, and that's the object right over the tree. You tell me what we're looking at. You tell me what we're looking at. Who is the prince of the power of the air? Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders, that even the elect would be deceived if that was possible. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Men faint from fear for what is coming upon the earth. I'm not making this stuff up. I wish I was, but I'm not. When we saw this, I fell out of my chair and went, oh my, we've got the smoking gun. The History Channel, I'm not really supposed to say this, but the History Channel did a 7-part series on Fatima. Okay? So they got Fina de Armada and Jose Machado, in Portuguese it's Jose, it's not Jose, it's Jose, that's how it's pronounced. So don't correct me later. So Jose, I didn't know it either. So Jose and Fina are together, and the History Channel is filming them, and they're showing this picture. They're discussing Jose's incredible, groundbreaking work. It's all on film. 7-part series. Whoop! Somebody from an organization, which I won't name, puts the kibosh on it. And all the six films go out, but not the one with Jose and not the one with Fina talking about the object. Didn't go out. It was quashed. So Francisco, our guide and good friend over there, has got, I've never seen the actual interviews, but he's got it, but he can't show it publicly. But Jose published a small book, which we then published, Burn in the Fire. We haven't reprinted it yet. It's a really small book, but he talks about what the photograph was. This is amazing. Here's the deal, folks. 95, 99% of the people in Portugal have never seen that photograph because it was totally quashed by powers that be that start with a big V. That's where it came from. Completely quashed. And was never, people in America have never seen this. They've never seen this. It's only through our work that people have seen it. And and people go, when I'm on Coast to Coast or other, oh, well, you just hate Mary, you're just bashing Catholics. And I go, no, have you seen the film? Well, no, but you're just, I go, if you haven't seen the film, how can you possibly talk about it? Because we never bash Mary, we never talk about Mary, we never say anything disparaging about Catholics or what they believe. In fact, we go out of our way to make sure we don't do that. But this is the evidence. Here it is. This is the sneaking, smoking gun. It's a disc over the tree, which is exactly what the eyewitnesses said. It's not Mary of the Bible or anything else. It's a flipping disc, and it's over the sanctuary. And everybody's freaking out. Oh! But wait, it gets better. What is happening in modernity? Watch. What is happening in modernity?
What happened at Fatima is now in the far distant past. Over 100 years ago, events occurred which are still the subject of debate today. However, there have been numerous apparition sites since 1917. This segment will explore more of a strange phenomenon that is occurring in modernity.
You want to crank the
We will
volume
present
up
real
on this.
footage of so-called apparitions and ask you to determine what it is you are looking at. Can we really ascertain what these indistinct images of light are? You be the judge.
This is all recent. This is Conyers, Georgia. Satan appears with all signs and lying wonders. As a former Roman Catholic and 3-year seminarian for the priesthood, I want to thank you for your expose on Fatima. I frequently watch EWTN, which carries many discussions and presentations on Fatima. I actually began preaching about the deception of Fatima about 5 or 6 years ago as I continue to hear confusing accounts about what happened in Portugal, 1917. Your video is a classic. I am looking forward to sharing it with many of my Christian and Catholic friends. Thanks for your diligence on this product. I am looking forward to part 2. So here's the deal. When you watch the apparitions and sun miracles happening in modernity, you heard the people, complete craziness, screaming, yelling, "Oh, thank you, Lord," as this clouds open up and there's like a religious figure that kind of looks like Jesus. But can we really, just because there's a blob of light, that's supposed to be Mary? Because there's a blob of light with this blue thing hanging down? It's not Mary. It's just a blob of light with a blue thing. No one's rebuking first, asking questions later. No one's doing that. No one's testing the spirits. No one's rebuking anything. They're all just accepting it. John tells us, hey, did Jesus come in the flesh? No one's yelling that out. No one's doing anything. They're all just going, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, falling to their knees and worshiping as like it's something. This is where we are, and this is not 1917. This is in modernity. 2009, we actually wanted to go there, and the Lord said no. So thank God we didn't. There were all these Muslims and Christians together in the courtyard. And by the way, the mayor, that apparition lasted for 2 weeks, off and on. And the mayor of the town right outside of Cairo turned off all the power to make sure it wasn't being hoaxed. And sure enough, the apparition to the blobs of light. And those blobs of light, the big one is Mary holding the baby Jesus. The baby Jesus. That's so true. And then behind him is Joseph, and then maybe the angel. What? First of all, it's blasphemous to think that Jesus would appear as a baby. It's utterly blasphemous. He sits at the right hand of the Father. He is the King. End of story. Jesus is the King. He's not some little baby in his mother's arms anymore. That was then, this is now. He's the King. And he's going to come back and he's going to rule. End of story. So it's absolutely, utterly blasphemous. But it plays on everybody's, oh, it's mother and child, Nimrod and Semiramis. Oh, look at that. It's this wonderful, hallelujah. Let's burn some candles. I mean, it's wacky. This is where we are right now in 2019. And this stuff is not going away. And as you'll see tonight, what is happening is the whole UFO disclosure is pressing. So why is this important? Why is Fatima? Why did I do these films? Because Fatima sets a precedent to accept this type of phenomenon. That's what it does. It makes it, oh, some miracle. Oh, it's got to be Mary. Hallelujah. Let's go. And you saw all these people falling down and basically worship. Oh, Lord. No one's rebuking first and ask questions later. Even if you see an angel of light, you don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. You've got to rebuke first, ask questions later. End of story. No one's doing that. Nobody's doing that. And frankly, I find that incredibly alarming, but it's a sign of the times. It's a sign of the times. It's where we are. Thank you for listening. I will be back at 7 o'clock this evening. It's a UFO presentation. Thanks, guys.